Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unread Book Summary channel. We're so glad you're here with us today, wherever you might be tuning in from. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more book journeys. Now, Crime and Punishment, it's huge, right?
Whoa.
Dense stuff. But our mission today isn't just a plot summary. We're doing a deep dive, really pulling out the 10 essential takeaways, philosophical, social, the works, so you get a solid, nuanced grasp of this monster of a novel.
And it really is a monster, but in the best way. It's got this unique standing, I think, because very few books manage to capture the sheer desperation, the poverty, the suffering, and that social inequality of, well, ordinary people with such power. It's vital for understanding morality under extreme pressure.
Okay, let's jump right in. We're structuring this around key themes, starting with how Dostoevsky even got started and how that kind of set the stage. Hashtag foundational themes and intellectual antecedents. So we actually need to start before the crime itself. Back in 1845, Dostoevsky put out his first novel, Poor Folk. And it was like a massive success. The big critic at the time, Belinsky, basically called him a genius on the spot, said he'd be bigger than Gogol.
Which is incredible for a first book. And what's really striking, even in Poor Folk and his next one, The Double from 46, you already see this intense focus, the sensitivity towards the poor, the really desperate characters, the tragic side of life.
So these themes were there from the very beginning.
Absolutely. They weren't just background noise. They were the heart of it. And that understanding, I think, really fueled his later critique of these sort of rationalist ideas floating around, the ideas that Raskolnikov picks up in Crime and Punishment. He understood the victims deeply before creating this intellectual killer.
That's a great point. It sets up our main guy, Rodion Raskolnikov. People often just think, oh, poor student, driven to crime by poverty. But the reality is way more complex and maybe more chilling. He's definitely not your average criminal.
Right, this is where the novel's intellectual framework really clicks in. Raskolnikov's crime isn't just, a robbery gone wrong. It's a planned experiment. A social, psychological test, really, designed to prove his whole philosophical system.
And that system was tied into the radical ideas of the time in Russia. Nihilism and all that.
Exactly. He's grappling with those. So this theory, the extraordinary man theory, it's essentially elitist, but it's dressed up as philosophy. He believes society is divided. You've got the masses, the ordinary, who have to follow the rules, the moral laws.
Okay.
And then you have the rare few, the extraordinary. Think Napoleon, Muhammad, people he sees as having the right, maybe even the duty, to step over those moral lines, even commit crimes, if it serves some higher purpose for humanity.
Wow. So killing the pawnbroker wasn't about the money primarily?
Not really. It was his test case. Can he transgress? Does he belong in that elite category, free from conventional morality? Hashtag the tragic experiment and moral isolation.
So he does it. He kills the old pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna, and her sister Lizaveta, who stumbles in. His goal?
Yeah.
Prove the theory, achieve intellectual freedom. But the immediate result? It's not triumph, is it? It's total collapse. Emotionally, morally.
Complete collapse. And that's his fundamental error. He completely misread, human nature. He actually believed he could commit this act and it wouldn't touch his relationships, his connection to others, or even his own internal world, his psyche.
He thought he could just rationally detach.
Precisely. Detach the moral self from the act. But the philosophy just crumbles. He realizes in agony that he didn't just kill some louse, some vile pawnbroker. As he puts it, he killed himself morally.
And the isolation kicks in right away.
Instantly. He feels cut off from his mother, his sister Dunya, from everyone. It's proof, really, that you can't just intellectually sever yourself from the human community.
Okay, so while Raskolnikov is wrestling with his self-inflicted spiritual death, Dostoevsky shows us people dealing with actual grinding, non-theoretical suffering. The Marmeladovs, they're sort of the tragic counterpoint.
Oh, absolutely. You have Marmeladov himself, the drunkard, and then his wife, Katerina Ivanovna. She's dying of consumption, fiercely proud, clinging to this idea of her aristocratic past, refusing to be disrespected despite their utter poverty.
And then there's Sonia.
Sonia Marmeladov. She carries so much of the book's emotional weight. Driven by poverty, she has to become a prostitute, get that infamous yellow ticket. Dostoevsky doesn't shy away from it. There's this incredible, powerful image.
The 30 rubles.
Yes. She comes home, puts 30 rubles on the table for her stepmother, Katerina Ivanovna, and then the text says she spends the whole night just kneeling by Katerina's bed, her shoulders shaking. It's dignity in the face of absolute horror. A stark contrast to Raskolnikov's intellectual pride. Hashtag tag Dunya's calculated sacrifice and Lujin's selfishness.
We see another kind of sacrifice, maybe, with Raskolnikov's sister, Dunya, Avdotya Romanovna. She agrees to marry Pyotr Petrovich Lujin, He's older, 45, a civil servant. Seems well off.
Seems like a rescue, right? A way out of poverty for her and her mother. But Lujin, he's another kind of parasite in the novel. Different from the pawnbroker, but just as exploitative.
How so? What's his angle?
It's pure calculation. He figures that by saving Dunya from poverty, she'll be so indebted, so grateful that she'll basically worship him. She'll be completely subservient. He wants a wife who feels eternally beneath him.
So it's not generosity. It's about power and control manufactured through debt.
Exactly. It's utterly transactional and self-serving. And you see his true colors, his real vileness, when he tries to frame Sonia for theft at Marmeladov's funeral wake, tries to plant money on her.
That's just low.
It's despicable. Thankfully, it backfires completely because Lebeziatnikov, who's this sort of slightly absurd progressive character, sees him do it and calls him out. But it shows Lujin is using calculation for selfish, destructive ends, just like Raskolnikov, only maybe less philosophically dressed up.
Things shift when Raskolnikov encounters Porfiry Petrovich, the examining magistrate. This is where it gets really interesting structurally. Porfiry doesn't seem to have much hard evidence, does he?
No, he kind of sidesteps the physical evidence. He goes straight for psychological warfare. He wants to fight Raskolnikov on his own turf, the intellectual, the philosophical.
And he has a key piece of ammunition, right?
He does. It's brilliant. It's not a bloody axe or stolen goods. It's Raskolnikov's own article published sometime earlier where he lays out this whole extraordinary man theory.
The very theory that motivated the crime.
Precisely. Porfiry says he read this young amateur's fiery pen experiment and basically knew right then that the author was capable of violence. He understood that this specific kind of intellectual pride, this justification, was the real driver.
So he's playing chess, not checkers. He's waiting for Raskolnikov's own mind to betray him.
Exactly. He doesn't need fingerprints when he can see the philosophical blueprint for the crime right there in Raskolnikov's own words. He just needs to apply pressure until the internal contradictions force a confession. He uses Raskolnikov's arrogance like a weapon.
Alongside Porfiry, there's another character who really challenges Raskolnikov, but in a different way. Svidrigailov. Dunya's creepy former employer. He seems like almost a living embodiment of the extraordinary man idea, but without any of Raskolnikov's guilt or angst.
That's a great way to put it. He's the cynical, amoral alternative. He sort of shows Raskolnikov where that path of pure detachment, of everything is permitted, ultimately leads. Its emptiness.
And he knows Raskolnikov's secret, doesn't he? He reveals it to Dunya.
He does. And Dunya rejects him completely. There's that intense scene where she actually shoots at him, misses killing him, but the bullet grazes his temple, draws blood. It's a definitive rejection.
But then his ending is strange. He does these charitable things before killing himself.
Yeah, it's fascinating. After Dunya rejects him, and maybe realizing the ultimate dead end of his own life philosophy, he arranges for Katerina Ivanovna's orphaned children, gives Sonia a large sum of money. These final acts of, well, kindness. Or maybe just tidying up.
Hard to say.
It is. Dostoevsky leaves it ambiguous, but perhaps it shows that even in the most cynical soul, that need for connection, or maybe just some kind of meaning beyond pure self-interest, can't be totally extinguished. Then he goes out, finds a watchman ironically named Achilles, makes a quip about going to America, and shoots himself.
A bleak end. It confirms that Raskolnikov's path, if followed to its conclusion without repentance, leads nowhere good.
Absolutely. Svidrigailov is the cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Hashtag Raskolnikov's path to redemption and the epilogue.
Okay, so we have Porfiry's psychological pressure, Svidrigailov's dead end, and crucially, Sonia's unwavering moral guidance and compassion. Eventually, Raskolnikov can't take it anymore. He heeds Sonia's plea that he can't stay alone, that he must confess.
And he does. He goes to the police station and confesses. This is the turning point. The sources really emphasize that the novel isn't ultimately about his downfall into crime, but about his painful, difficult moral ascent.
Even though he gets sentenced to Siberia. Penal servitude.
Yes, because the suffering there becomes the catalyst, the crucible for change. It's through that shared hardship and Sonia's presence, she follows him to Siberia, that he finds the inner strength to recreate himself.
So the ending isn't purely bleak.
Not at all. The epilogue leaves them on the verge, on the threshold of a new life. It suggests that real humanity, real connection is found not through intellectual separation or transgression, but through accepting suffering, responsibility, and shared experience. Love, essentially. Hashtag the theme of human interconnectedness.
Which brings us neatly to what seems like the core philosophical lesson here. Raskolnikov's whole rationalist project, his 18th century-inspired individualism. It just completely fails him, doesn't it?
Utterly. And that's Dostoevsky's big message, I think. Contrary to these philosophies that emphasize the isolated individual, Dostoevsky argues you're never truly alone. Raskolnikov tried desperately to cut himself off, to be that solitary, extraordinary man.
But his conscience wouldn't let him.
Exactly. His conscience suffered because that deep, inherent social connection, what the text calls the popular essence within him, was stronger than his intellectual delusion. His very being cried out for connection, for reintegration, accepting punishment, accepting Sonia's love. That's him finally acknowledging his unbreakable bond with humanity. #lasting literary significance.
Looking back, the novel's structure is just masterful, isn't it?
Yeah.
How it weaves together this gripping crime story, the psychological torment, with this really deep philosophical debate about Raskolnikov's theory.
It's seamless, and that's why it still resonates so strongly today. Its value isn't just historical, it's the depth of that philosophical core. It makes you confront uncomfortable questions, like how we justify inequality or our own detachment from the suffering of others. Do we create intellectual theories, big or small, to feel separate, maybe superior?
Right. And here's a final thought maybe for you, the listener, to chew on. Raskolnikov starts seeking freedom through the ultimate transgression, murder justified by intellect. But the freedom he eventually finds isn't through breaking rules, but through submitting to love, shared suffering, and reintegration into the community. So the question becomes, if radical individualism isolates, where is that line? How much self-reliance is necessary, and when does it curdle into the kind of destructive isolation Raskolnikov experienced? Something to think about. This concludes today's book summary. Thank you for joining us and for your continued support. Please subscribe to stay updated with our latest summaries, and we'll see you in the next video.